Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. I will find myself before this show is over agreeing with Ron Johnson about something. Stick around for that.
Hey, this is Arif Hasan with the Wide Left Substack. I'm in Mobile, Alabama. Found a way to get even further away from Luke Braun.
Luke Inman at Luke_Spinman. So we got Arif Hasan and Rick Spielman both down at the Senior Bowl at the same time. I'm sure he's got a story or two to tell.
And I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, and I will stay away from Arif for as long as he is in Alabama.
Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Football Party.
What's up, everybody? It's a Thursday. It's the Minnesota Football Party on Locked On Sports Minnesota. We're so glad you've joined us today. Perhaps watching on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. Please subscribe and check out the 24/7 YouTube stream. Also listening on the Locked On Vikings audio feed, where Luke Braun puts out daily shows and lets us crash. We do not pay rent. You can also find us on the SiriusXM app, Amazon Fire, Roku, lots of ways to watch and listen to this show and other shows on Locked On Sports Minnesota, like the Minnesota Basketball Party, the Ron Johnson Show, and the Friday Roundtables. Today's show brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL, linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So much to get to today. Brian Flores looks increasingly more likely that he is returning. His name has not come up whatsoever, and it probably means a return to Minnesota next year. Are you fearing regression, or do you trust in B-Flow? We also have Arif Hasan live in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. He has locked and loaded Minnesota Vikings targets that they will pick. They will absolutely pick. He's already
100%.
figured out
100%.
who they will take in the draft. And we will dive into Ron Johnson's favorite quarterback, JJ McCarthy. Is he a realistic Minnesota Vikings quarterback of the future? Wide receiver free agents as well. Ron Johnson will join. It is the usual overly packed Thursday show, and we'll try to get to it all. But we begin with, why don't we begin with Arif? Because he's on location. We can't just bury the lead here. Arif is in Mobile, Alabama, watching future Minnesota Vikings take the field. Arif, I don't want any hesitation. I want your favorite future Minnesota Viking from Senior Bowl.
As a future Minnesota Viking, probably Quinyon Mitchell, Toledo cornerback. He's been doing real well here. He's been playing both man and zone coverage. He's been playing with a ton of confidence. He's, 6'1", 6 feet tall, something like that, 198 pounds. He plays with a lot of physicality. But the thing is, he just doesn't lack confidence. Like, he hasn't really lost many reps. If he has, it's primarily been to Roman Wilson, who's been having an outstanding set of practices here at the Senior Bowl. But like, the thing about him is that in his mind, he has not lost a single rep, and that rules. One of my friends had him on Radio Row on a podcast, and they were talking, just about random stuff. And at the end of the podcast, he goes, "Yeah, I'm a former Ohio Bobcat." And immediately Mitchell goes, "Oh, I'm sorry I did that to you, man. We beat you so hard. We beat you so hard."
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So he's great. I love him a lot. There's also probably, and he might go in the first round. In fact, I think most projections have him in the first round, and he might have moved himself up from the 18-20 range to, the 11-12 range, right? He's been playing extremely well, and the level of competition change has not really, impacted his quality of play at all.
Holy crap. His stats are unbelievable.
Yeah, he
Just
was
looking at him now.
Yeah, and again, small school, Toledo, obviously you get
Smallish.
some inflated stats, but so nice for him to go in to the Senior Bowl and go up against guys like Roman Wilson, Brendan Rice. I mean, just big name.
Oh, he has clamped Brendan Rice, dude. It's not close. Yeah, wow. It's not close.
Wow.
Sam, you looked up the stats. What are the stats? What do they say?
His college passer rating against in over 2,000 snaps, 56.6.
Jeez.
6 picks, 29 PBUs. Completion percentage against 45.9. Shutdown. Over a 90 PFF grade the last 2 years.
This guy's good. This guy's good. So he's
good.
done really well regardless of the level of competition. I think a little bit later in the draft, there's a 6'3" corner named Cam Hart here from Notre Dame. He's like 210 pounds. He carries that weight really well. He plays a lot of physicality as well. He knows how to use his 6'3" frame. He's won a ton of reps here. He's played a little bit better here in zone coverage than in man coverage, which you kind of, with that profile, sometimes you expect him to be a man corner. But, he plays really well with his eyes on the quarterback. And, he's looked really good against like Tez Walker, for example, who's a pretty physical, tall North Carolina receiver who plays a lot of speed. He's been able to match that physicality 1-for-1. He's come up with at least 2 picks against Tez Walker specifically, but he's also done just a very good job locating the ball, playing with patience, and then having just a lot available to him that, I don't know, I really like. So those are the 2 guys that I think at cornerback, which is, I think where the Vikings, have a huge need, could help themselves a lot. But I think this is, aside from quarterback, I think that this is one of the more talent-rich Senior Bowls that we've had. There's a bunch of people I like on the offensive and defensive lines the Vikings could target. A bunch of people in the secondary, like I just mentioned. The receivers have been a lot of fun to watch. Just, not the linebackers, not the quarterbacks. Those are pretty not great.
Well, I was going to ask you, first of all, props to Jim Nagy because there's 7 quarterbacks down there. He does us all a favor. He puts Penix and Nix on the same team. So at least we can watch, side by side right next to each other. And then he puts those 2 on the team with 3 quarterbacks so they get as many reps as possible. But obviously both those guys, Penix and Nix, in the first round conversation, have either of them done anything to sway you away from the notion or confirm that they should be discussed as first round guys?
Neither look like first round guys to me. Based off of what Penix has done here, I would say he's not played himself out of the first round. He has just not convinced me that he is compellingly like a first rounder, right? I think it's been a lot of routine stuff, which is really valuable, right? Being consistent from play to play. And he's played with a little bit more anticipation and accuracy than the other quarterbacks here, which is like always interesting, right? To have anticipation with receivers that you've never played with. I think that's pretty meaningful and nice, but it's just, there's not been a ton of wow plays. There's not like, this is a Senior Bowl where we've got a ton of giant arm quarterbacks, right? Mm-hmm. And in that environment, he does not look like a guy with a huge arm, right? When Joe Milton's throwing, when Bo Nix is throwing, when you've got these guys just firing off cannons, right? Penix, who's a strong arm, has not really showcased that in ways that make you think that he can use that, at least in these practices. Obviously, we see it on film. But he's been okay, just like, some bad plays here and there. But Nix has looked awful. It's been bad. He's had bad play after bad play, bunch of interceptions. He's throwing the ball out of bounds a lot on these deep throws. He had to throw right before I show up here. There was a big play where everybody was like excited. They were yelling. Someone asked, "Who was that quarterback?" And it was Bo Nix. And I was like, "Oh my God, did Bo Nix actually get one?" Because I was just harassing some other sports where I wasn't actually watching the play. And did Bo Nix actually get that one? And someone turns to me, he's like, "What do you mean, did Bo Nix finally get one?" I was like, "Was that a pick? Were people celebrating a pick?" And they're like, "Yeah, egregiously underthrown."
Oh man.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Quinyon Mitchell wasn't in on the play because he's taken the day off. He's done enough. He's fine.
So you didn't even have to go against the top corner D-back, on that team during practice. Come on.
Yeah, it's rough. So Nix has looked pretty bad. Joe Milton is a guy where you're like, hey, maybe, if he's in a real offense, right? Not the Tennessee offense, and maybe Jim Harbaugh didn't want to coach him at Michigan. I don't know. But, maybe, if he gets like NFL coaching as the primary quarterback or something, he could look good. Nope. He's bad.
No, he's bad, huh? All right, so he's
out.
So if the Vikings do draft a quarterback, whether it's 11 or they move up, whatever, they already don't have a third rounder, but they've got 2 4s, 2 5s, 2 6. So you draft a quarterback. I think the attention goes straight to defense, I would assume. But who's some like current projected, and this is very fluid, I get it, but like day 3 guys that's kind of sticking out down there on defense? We know about the Quinton Mitchells and everything else, but like potential day 3 guys where the Vikings actually have some real ammo there, can throw some darts up on the board that maybe we should jot down.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because a lot of these guys are playing themselves up into day 2. Okay. And some of them even that were day 2 guys may have played themselves into day 1. Like the Missouri edge rusher, Dorius Robinson, he was a day 2, day 3 fringe guy. Right? Like on Dan Brugler's most recent mock draft, he goes 64th, right? Or something along those lines. And now people are talking about him as a first round pick. He's playing really well. And so, if he falls there, obviously, I think that the Vikings should be kind of interested in him, trade up a 4th rounder to get into the 3rd round and grab that kind of guy. But, there's a couple of people here that, like the Baylor guy, Dorlis Robinson, something like that.
Yep. Is it Oregon or is it Baylor?
I thought it was Baylor.
Okay.
Green helmet, man. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know these guys here.
They're all
but he's looked pretty good. I really like what he's been able to put together. I think everybody from Missouri here has been really fantastic. Like the cornerback has been pretty good. The offensive lineman has been pretty good. The defensive lineman I just mentioned has been pretty good. So those are the kind of guys that I'm kind of intrigued by. At cornerback, I think the Louisville guy, Brownlee, he's been kind of fun. He's had a lot of plays on the ball here. I think I've seen him talked about as a day 3 guy, so he's somebody that you might want to go after, especially if you can't go after those corners I mentioned in day 1. If you get that quarterback. So I really like Brownlee. I think he's looked good. Like I said, the Missouri guy, he's got a hyphenated name, Gaines Adams, something like that. I don't know. There's a Chris in there. I thought he's looked good. And then look, man, I'm learning about these guys on the fly.
Yeah, there's a Chris in there. I haven't recognized a single name that you was
90 different names to learn the week before. It's tough, man. I feel
Dorian Thompson Robinson. That's what I heard.
I get it.
Yeah, that's exactly who I want.
Chris Abrams Drain.
That's it. Yeah, Chris Abrams Drain. Yeah. And he's been kind of fun to watch. He's been playing physicality, and he might be a slot type guy too, so you could have somebody compete with Mekhi Blackman. So I like those guys. And then along the offensive line, there's just a ton of offensive line talent here too, right? So we talk a little bit about the defensive line, but this offensive line has looked great. So you have a couple of 1st rounders in like Talise Fuaga, Oregon State guy, who someone was telling me like, hey, in another draft class, if there weren't 11 offensive linemen slated to go in the 1st round, and that's a number, 11 offensive linemen slated to go in the 1st round, Fuaga might be a top 10, top 12 pick, and he just can't be now. Right, because you've got Joe Alt and Fashanu and so on.
Right.
And I really like the way that he moves. But what's really cool about that is that it pushes this offensive line talent, further down the draft. It becomes a really deep class. You might find a 3rd rounder that in other years will go in the 2nd round. And so I'm looking at guys, maybe not like Fuaga, who's just not going to be available for the Vikings in the 2nd round, or if they trade down in the 2nd round or anything like that. But I'm looking at guys that in the 4th round might be interesting, like the Illinois guard, Isaiah Adams or something along those lines.
Yep.
He moves extremely well. He's made a couple of mistakes here. I don't think he's a 1st rounder or anything like that, but he plays with a lot of power. He moves extremely well. Whenever they've got some sort of screen pass or some sort of, after the catch, 3-yard, whatever, he's always down the field, first one to block. That's been kind of fun. So you might not get like a Jackson Powers Johnson or anything like that, the Oregon center guard, who's been playing outstandingly here. Right, you might not get, the Oklahoma tackle that's been playing outstandingly here, but you might be able to get some of these guards that have been playing really well, that have been moving really well, and people like him or like the Arkansas center Bo Limmer, who I thought have looked pretty good. That like, hey, maybe the Vikings don't, re-sign Dalton Risner or something like that. They have a hole at left guard. These guys that might be able to target.
Have you seen any Vikings personnel in attendance?
Mostly PR. I saw Carly Bonk, said hi.
Oh, hey, Carly.
But from a personnel standpoint, they're on the other side of the stands, right? So we don't use the same entrance. I can't see them, and I'm not going to the hotel for like the mixers and stuff like that. It's kind of a different environment. People don't go to the hotel anymore, and
it's not the cool hot spot anymore. Where the
and the bar. Luke and I, we went to Veets a lot. That place is like dead. No one's going to Veets anymore.
What?
So
it's over?
It's bad.
It runs over.
Gen Z ruins everything.
Yeah. Wow. So I see like a couple of guys in Vikings gear. One would assume are Vikings personnel, but that's not always the case. Like at the Haberdasher, the Alchemist, or something like that. I haven't really talked to them, but they're here and there. Certainly, the Vikings making a presence at the Senior Bowl. That's for sure.
And how about your daily lunch routine or dinner? Saucy Q's, the hot spot barbecue spot a lot of people used to go to. Is that out as well too? Is that not cool enough?
People going to Dreamland more than Saucy Q's now, and I don't really get it. Like Dreamland gets you your food faster, right? So that makes sense, but Saucy Q's is just so much better. Like it's just not close to me. Yeah. So that's kind of the lunch option. But the thing is, we've moved from Lad People Stadium to Hancock-Whitney Stadium on the South Alabama campus. And so it's just a bunch of different food scene. So for breakfast the first day, I just went to the Waffle House on campus, right? Nice. It's just different. I went to a Fusakli's for lunch once. Just got chicken fingers. It's a little bit different. So it's a weird. I haven't been in the Senior Bowl in a couple of years, so it's been a weird change for me. Different campus, different environment, different food options. The town closes down at like 9 for food, so it's really tough to find pretty good food late at night. I went to BJ's for dinner. Had their world famous Pizookie, which is a pizza cookie.
Interesting.
And I had the time of my life. That place ruled. The server wanted me to leave a positive review because it would look good for her, and she was one of the best servers I've ever had in my life. I highly recommend BJ's in Mobile, Alabama.
And did you leave the review, or did you?
Yeah, no, I did it in front of her.
No, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it, and then forget to do it. Okay,
Luke, we still owe that guy down in Mankato a review, I think. From do you remember Bonfire,
dude?
Bonfire in Mankato. I'm sorry, sir. We still have not left that
This
review.
guy spent money and made us a poster board and advertising to put up. Me and young Sam Ekstrom show up after one Mankato practice, beat red, sunburnt, dehydrated, and we just winged it for about 90 straight minutes in front of the happy hour lunch crowd going on. But yeah, I forgot about that. Great call.
Yeah, still got to get to that.
Okay, wait a minute. Last one. Who's the most funny random person you've just turned around, whether it's out for lunch or at practice or walking around, that you've been like, oh, it's Charles Davis from NFL Network, or a former GM, Les Snead. Who's the most random funny guy you've seen?
I haven't. There's just not been a ton of that's an NFL guy around here. I physically ran into Ian Rappaport, which is, it's always nice to find somebody shorter than me. So that happened.
The one guy, you found him.
Yeah. Well, also Benjamin Solak is spiritually he's shorter than me.
True.
I kind of hang out there. Danny Kelly from The Ringer, been hanging out with him a lot. It's been a ton of fun.
Love that.
Borno's here, by the way. Tyler and I are sharing an Airbnb. It's been fun.
Love that. That's awesome, man. Serious FOMO going on, man. I know you're ripping it up and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, you should be here. What the hell?
Yeah.
That's
did Lockdown not pay for it? We're going to talk about B-Flow. Brian Flores almost assuredly back to the Minnesota Vikings. That's next on the Minnesota Football Party. And we are brought to you today by LinkedIn Jobs. It is now February, but we're still in Q1. You're probably still handling your hiring for the first part of the year. And you're wearing a lot of hats. You've got a lot going on. And because you're a small business owner, that's what you do. You toil the day away, you burn the midnight oil, and you don't always have time to sift through resumes and try to find the perfect hire. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has the right tools to make that process intuitive, quick, and easy for you. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours when they use LinkedIn Jobs, which mines its billion-person professional network. Billion with a B. Small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're also presented today by DoorDash, and DoorDash is going to come in handy with the big game coming up. You want to have your fun, your family, your food. You want to get the apps, the restaurant food, the drinks. Maybe you're buying groceries so you can make your Super Bowl buffet by hand in the kitchen. And DoorDash is the best thing to use. So maybe you're watching the pregame show. There's a little timeout in the pregame feature stories. Put in your order for DoorDash. It takes 2 minutes because you don't want to root for your team on the big game Sunday with an empty stomach. So get your party favorites with DoorDash. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app, enter code LOCKED23. Subject to change, terms apply. That's 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Download the DoorDash app, enter code LOCKED23. Subject to change, terms apply. So Dan Quinn has been hired as the head coach of the Washington Commanders. All the head coach vacancies have been filled. So unless Brian Flores is going to take a demotion somewhere or a lateral move. He is staying with the Minnesota Vikings.
Get away from flyover country. That makes sense.
He's back. He's back, people. This is what you desperately wanted, like as of week 13, and still pretty much wanted in week 17, even though the wheels fell off. So how are we feeling now about year 2 of Brian Flores? Are there nerves about regression, or is there optimism that a second year can only reap dividends? If you look at what he did in Miami, year 2 in Miami was his best year. And granted, that team poured a lot of free agency resources into that defense, but they were number 1 in takeaways that next year. Boy, could the Vikings use that kind of boost in year 2 with Flores.
The Flores defense is, I don't think, a complete thought. Like, I feel like we saw the beta test a little bit for the first year of this weird idea of playing more zone coverage behind all these blitzes. And I genuinely have no idea if he's even going to like try to do that again, or just sort of slide back into a more still very blitz heavy, still very aggressive, but more like what we saw in Miami, which was a little bit more familiar and a little more normal in the world of like Belichick tree defenses. Or are we going to come up with something new and some new adjustment to all of this that hopefully makes it a little bit that can subvert everything that kind of got them in December. That's the big like question for me. But I think for a lot of players, especially people on that 2022 draft class that have had to learn a new scheme every year, I think it's really big for them to not have to, and gives them a chance to develop a little bit more than they already could have. Maybe it's too late for those guys, but like for somebody like Andrew Booth, who I do think took a little bit of a step forward, that's good news for him. That means that he can even learn something. And even for Lewis Cine, like we haven't seen nearly what we want from him yet. But a second year in the same scheme, that can only be a good thing, I think. So it's great for the Vikings for him to be back. I don't know what regression even means. The Vikings by EPA were literally exactly average in both the run and the pass. They're like dead in the middle of the chart. So like,
that's not like representative, right? Like,
I mean, you had 8 up games and 8 down games. So I don't know what regress is. we go from, we just get the same result, but like a more normal version of it. Actually, that sounds awful. I don't want that.
That's terrible.
Yeah, let's get weird.
I would say that, like, look, if Flores had run one good defense in his life and it was last year's defense, right, I would be concerned, right? Because he'd be living off of the innovation that defense was, and the fact that people didn't really have an answer to it or adapt to it until the final couple of weeks of the season, right? But that's not how it's been. Like you've mentioned, Sam, he's run a number of good defenses before, even going back to New England, right? So there's Miami defenses, New England defenses. This defense is not those, not those defenses, right? In terms of scheme. The way that this defense emerged is because he took a chance. He was bold. He's a smart guy, and he was flexible, right? And those are qualities that'll help the Vikings improve their defense, at least from a consistency standpoint going forward. I mean, last year's defense was like a make work, right? They're like, we don't have guys, so we got to do this. We don't have guys, so we got to do that. And I don't think that the high highs of last year are going to be replicated, because that's just what defensive play is like, right? There was not a huge change from 2017 to 2018 in the Vikings defense in terms of scheme, and it just kind of fell off. I mean, that's just what happens with good defenses. But I do think that the defense will be substantially better than it was in 2020 or 2021 or 2022, just because you've got a pretty good defensive coordinator who's pretty smart, and you're probably going to acquire a little bit more talent than they had last year. So I think that, regression is probably not accurate, but we're probably not going to see some of the incredible, crazy stuff that we saw in the middle of the season, where for about 10 games, they were the second best or third best defense in the NFL by EPA per play. We're probably not going to see that, but we're also probably not going to see the first 4 weeks or the final 4 weeks of the season. So I think that probably the defense overall will generally improve. I think that Brian Flores has proven to be an intelligent defensive coordinator, and I don't think we're going to see the exact same stuff we saw last year. I think they're going to be the kind of tweaks. I mean, remember in 2016 when Mike Zimmer got absolutely clowned by, Sean McVay, right? The 2017 defense was one of the best Vikings defenses that we've had, in the modern Vikings era. You'd have to go back to the Purple People Eaters to find better defenses, right? So I don't think that a defense being solved is the end of that defensive coordinator's capability to create good defenses. So I am pretty positive. I'm pretty optimistic about, Flores' ability to produce a good defense. I just don't think that we should reasonably expect them to produce top 3 results all year next year, because I think that was a little bit of a fluke of novelty that they're not going to have the advantage of next year.
It's a really fun problem to cover, because it's a fun problem.
Yes.
It's an interesting problem to solve.
Yeah.
Let me offer one correction. The Vikings got clowned the year after they had the league's best defense.
Okay, well, 2019 was a pretty decent defense.
Yeah, and the rest of 2018 was incredible too.
And Zimmer clowned McVay in 2017, and then McVay got him back in 2018. That was
that follows
back and forth.
Yeah,
but
that's a good point. Yeah, not a lot to add. I think you both hit on a lot of good points. For the most part, just big picture in general, whatever Flores touches usually turns out well or above average. I mean, he's got that good track record, like you guys said. Wherever he's at, his defenses, more times than not, are typically better than most. So sometimes a coach's scheme, can outweigh the talent, or at least, mask some of the talent deficiencies you might have on a roster. And I think he's in that tier or grouping of defensive coaches that can elevate a roster and kind of exceed expectations like he did last year for a good chunk of the year, because of the system and scheme that, like Arif said, he kind of gambled on, rolled the dice with, but it panned out for most of the year until the end. Having said that, though, too, it's tough to sit here and feel super confident about what it's all going to look like and say with confidence that it's going to improve and get even better without seeing the moves they make this offseason. I know it's cliche, but as good as he was at maximizing each player's unique skill set, there was plenty of times you could see, especially towards the end of the year, that roster and depth chart, man, it was hanging by a thread. It was being held together with duct tape. I mean, the last 4 or 5 weeks of the year, especially when you compare to the beginning of the year, what they started with, you're missing Davenport and Dean Laurie. Those were supposed to be 2 your starting defensive linemen. Wanham, your number 2 or 3 pass rusher. Byron Murphy was out. Evans was out. So those are your 2 top corners. Jordan Hicks missed a huge chunk. I mean, it was to the point, it was almost impossible not to have some regression when you lose that many players. So injuries happen. Totally get it. Happens to everybody. But they need to not only get another legitimate starter or 2 in the mix and elevate some of their starting talent, but they also need to replenish and stock back up some of the depth. So when you do get to November and December, they at least have some more options, some more guys to help fill the voids and not have such a stark contrast, I think, and drop off of talent from the starters to the second and third team guys. And until they do that, I'd have a hard time sitting here saying, I feel comfortable and confident they'll reach the peak of where they were at in 2023 when they were at their best for a full 17-game stretch in 2024. And, it's funny. I say that, and then at the same time, I think, like you guys touched on, you add a piece or 2 in free agency, you bring back Daniil, you add 3, 4, or 5 new young guys in the draft, even if they're day 3 guys. And then you add another year of experience for all those rookies and young guys that played going into now their second or third year in this same system for back-to-back years. That alone, I think, would make a good improvement, over the course of an entire season. So what they do this offseason, and we all know it starts at quarterback and snowballs from there, but that'll be the big domino we kind of need to see fall first.
All right, 10 seconds each. You have to choose. You get 1 starting cornerback or 1 starting pass rusher in the offseason. Can't pick both. Which one are you going with, Inman?
Pass rusher.
Ron?
Pass rusher, no hesitation.
Cornerback. Easy. Coverage matters more.
I go cornerback as well. I think you need 2 guys. You need Murphy and you need another guy, so that when you blitz, you can hold up in man occasionally.
I get the argument. I totally get it.
Really
I had a hard
Patrick
time with
Jones
that.
to take this thing home.
I had a hard time with that one.
Pat, we believe in you, Pat. We've always believed in you. No hesitation.
Yep. Andre Carter, it's his time.
You're up. Luigi Valette.
Andre Carter. Actually, I answered that knowing that Andre Carter would be a starting level pass rusher next year. He was high on the big board. We know that means he's good.
If they had to play a game at the beginning of the league year with no changes, he would be a starter. So
is Villain still in the mix?
He got poached.
No, he got poached. Yeah, that was fun, though.
He's in Washington.
He was my preseason fantasy football defensive star.
That's right.
We don't got to talk about preseason fantasy anything. Don't worry about it.
I'm really excited for year 2.
Panthers.
The league. We're waiting. Ron Johnson's here. He's just getting his camera figured out. We're gonna talk more JJ McCarthy in this show. And now Ron's gone. JJ McCarthy is my QB target of the day, and we can get the ball rolling on that discussion while Ron gets his technology figured out. I think we've got driving Ron today, which is always the best Ron.
Ooh.
JJ McCarthy is probably 6th right now on a lot of people's boards. Maybe if Bo Nix keeps underthrowing picks at the Senior Bowl, maybe he becomes like number 4 or 5. But Ron has been touting JJ McCarthy for a while now, and I might be starting to see why. In fact, I might be understanding this Ron affinity for JJ McCarthy. Ron, I'm welcoming you in with a word of agreement and support. You've been on the JJ McCarthy train for a while now, and I was always a little skeptical. It's like, man, they just run the ball. I don't know if he's kind of managing the game for Michigan, and I still think it's weird that they didn't let him throw in the second half against Penn State. But you dig into it a little bit, his play action is like really good. Under pressure, he's really good. His deep ball is really good. Like, he does a lot of things well. I don't look down upon that JJ McCarthy take anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he's 6'3", so he's a prototypical, what you're looking for in a quarterback, 6'3", 6'4", stands tall, doesn't slouch like Eli Manning, has more of a, hold his shoulders back type of quarterback. I mean, I know you laugh, Luke, but you know that. Eli is legit 6'5", but when you see him, he looks 6'3", 6'2". Like,
he's got little brother syndrome. I get it.
Yeah, he's got 6'2". Yeah. I get it. Yeah, about 3 inches shorter than he is energy.
Yeah, he doesn't stand tall, whereas like Tom Brady stands tall in the pocket. And JJ reminds me of that. And not to say it's a Michigan connection. I don't know if it's Harbaugh, the confidence he's given him. But I mean, when you watch him, he's focused. And for a young man to know as a young teen, he struggled with depression and stress. And so he sought after mental health. And a lot of guys don't do that. We've heard Ryan Leaf tell so many stories now about struggling with mental health as a quarterback and one of the top draft picks, and nobody was really there. Eli and Peyton had their dad. So they had somebody they could look to, somebody they could talk to, whereas Ryan Leaf didn't. So what did he do? He turned to alcohol to kind of numb the pain and to drown out the noise. And so JJ McCarthy, I think similar situation, he said, some tough teen years is how he put it. He realized he had to seek out help. And so now he has it. Michigan has it for him. He'll be an NFL quarterback somewhere, so he'll be able to afford to continue in that. But that just shows he has a head on his shoulders. Like he's checking in. And I know a couple, I'm not going to even say the names, publications tried to tweet jokes about it, talking about, some quarterbacks are doing this. Your quarterback's out here, checking on his mental health at halftime. It's like, yeah, but your quarterback's out there, drinking a pint of Hennessy and smoking a couple blunts with some Oxycontin because he can't handle it. And so I'll take the mental health over numbing the pain. And I think that's why I like JJ McCarthy. But the other part about it, Sam, and you hit it, he's really good at play action. He understands, if we have to run the ball, here's the looks I need to have. And when it all goes to hell, he can run. He showed he has some legs. He can move a little bit in the pocket. He did it against Washington. He did it against Penn State a little bit where he can run. And so, yeah, I think he's a guy that could sit behind Kirk Cousins for 2 years and really learn and grow and could be a good, think about it. He's a game manager. And who's one of the best game managers we have right now? Brock Purdy. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, and if you're a believer in quarterback age being a big factor, I mean, you've got a draft full of 24-year-olds, and JJ McCarthy turned 21 last week. Like, he's 21 the entire season this year. So there is upside there with McCarthy, who already has a pretty decent resume. Let me kick it to Luke Inman.
Yeah, Ron, sticking with the quarterback conversation, Vikings, obviously a lot of talk. They could be looking at the draft to take a quarterback, maybe even moving up for one. I'm curious, does watching the Panthers, what they went through, scare you off at all, knowing the cost of moving up to the top 3 from 11 is going to be so rich, and you're going to, have to mortgage so many future picks and assets. And we'll see what happens with Bryce Young in Carolina. But if it doesn't pan out, you're in such a hole for the next 2, 3, maybe even 4 years without all those early draft picks to rebuild your roster. Does that scare you at all? Or do you have a preference of moving up and say, hey, we're going to go get our guy versus staying put and hoping someone falls in your lap?
Hell yeah. Like, yeah, it scares me. Like, I would not want to move up. Like, for what? Like, Bryce Young, we still don't know. Like, CJ Stroud, yeah, he's the guy. Like, he is the guy. They got their guy. We don't even know if Anthony Richardson is the guy. Like, we didn't even see a full season of him. Is this going to be a long-term thing where he keeps getting hurt every year? Kind of like Andrew Luck and RG3. Like, are we going to be talking about like, man, this guy could be good if he can stay healthy? So we just don't know with moving up. The one thing I'll say is, again, I go back to the guy. Like, if JJ McCarthy is there at 11, don't play that game with thinking like, oh, let's trade back and we can get some more assets. But if you know for a fact, everybody that's taking a quarterback is taking their quarterback, and you know JJ will be there at the end of the first round, then you can play that game and drop back and then go get some more assets and get JJ McCarthy. I wouldn't move up for any of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I think that's pretty interesting. The thing that kind of concerns me is that you take a look at the really successful quote-unquote game managers in the NFL, right? Your Alex Smiths, your Brock Purdy's, and so on, and you look at how they played in college, and in college, they were the guy. They were not game managers in college. They became game managers in the NFL just because that's the style of play that suited them best for their circumstances, because they weren't as talented as somebody like a Cam Newton, right? Like, I get that. But JJ McCarthy is a game manager in college, and I don't know how many of those guys actually turn out to end up becoming good prospects, game managers or not, in the NFL, and that's kind of my concern. Like, you talk a little bit about how good he is at play action. I agree. He's fantastic at play action. Michigan also ran, surprisingly, despite how run-heavy they were, some of the fewest play action snaps out of all of the percentage of dropbacks in the FBS, which was like, why is that? You've got such a good run game. You've got a guy that knows how to design a great play action game. We saw that in San Francisco. So, like, why wouldn't they do that? Why isn't he asked to do that much and take over games if he's such a good quarterback prospect? I love Blake Corum. I understand why you put the ball in his hands, but why you won't ask your quarterback to take over games? That kind of alarms me. Does that kind of concern you a little bit?
No, because if you watch Blake Corum leave the game and you watch Donovan Edwards come in the game,
okay,
they got two horses. They got two horses. So when you have two horses, like, that's like going into your garage and you're like, oh, I got the Ferrari, I got the Bentley. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just drive. I'm gonna just go ahead and just drive this Ford Explorer. Like,
But you want to draft the Explorer.
Right, I do. You know why? Because it's dependable. It's gonna get 200,000 miles, and it's got great gas mileage.
Just turned into a Ford commercial. Yeah.
I had an Explorer. I had an Explorer in college. It got me through 4 great years. I had no issues with it. Like, it's dependable. Like, it got me from A to B every single time. But here's where I go with this though. So, and I'm not saying he's a Ford Explorer. I put him more like a Cadillac Escalade. How about that? So you got a Ferrari, you got a Bentley, but then you got a Cadillac Escalade. 3 really great options. If you want to stunt for them and you want to make sure you're gonna get to 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, you take the Ferrari. But if you really want to just mow people down, slow the game down, you're going to take the Escalade, and that's what ends up happening. It's like they didn't need the Escalade much, but if you watch Roman Wilson highlights at Michigan, number 1, he had some of the prettiest throws. Roman Wilson, like, didn't have to move an inch off his spot. He was dropping dimes in the back of the end zone. Like, Jay, when he has to deliver, he can deliver a ball. But the other side of Michigan too, though, Tom Brady. I played against Tom Brady in college. Tom Brady was the same way. Like, they had A-Train back then, Anthony Thomas. They had some really good running backs. Tom Brady wasn't actually do much, which is why he went in the 6th round. Like, if Tom Brady grew up in the social media era, he's easily a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd rounder. But because it was back then and nobody really knew Michigan, they looked at his stats, said he was splitting time with Drew Henson, the young kid out of Michigan who, came in, baseball player, went to the Yankees, blah, blah. They're like, oh, maybe Tom's not that good if Drew Henson, this sophomore, can come in and have to split time with him. No, like, Henson was good, but
also Tom Brady was one of the FBS leaders in game-winning drives. You see the Citrus Bowl? Come on. I mean, it's like a lot of game-winning drives from Tom Brady against Bama.
But he had to split time with Drew Henson, so that was a knock. Like, they knocked him for that because they're like, you guys are going in and out. But here's the other part about that with Tom Brady. When you go back to Michigan again, they had running backs. It was a running type of, we were a running league back then in the Big Ten. You look at Penn State with Larry Johnson. You got Minnesota, with Tellus Redmond, Thomas Hamner. You had A-Train there. You go over to Wisconsin, you had Ron Dane. Like, you go to Michigan State, you had TJ Duckett. Like, you had bruisers.
TJ Duckett, Ron Dane.
Purdue had Mike Allstott. You know what I mean? Like Purdue didn't become a passing team until Drew Brees' junior year.
Mm-hmm.
They were running the crap out the ball my freshman year, and then all of a sudden that next year we came back to play him, and he killed us for like 500 yards. But that's what the Big Ten was. It was like ground and pound. Every team was trying to find big offensive linemen and big running backs, and so Tom Brady got knocked. When I look at JJ McCarthy again, I look at body type, I look at movement in the pocket, I look at his eyes and his feet. I always look like Dan Orlovsky says this: can his feet marry his eyes? And I always was like, what the hell? So I text Ryan Clark and Dan that too, and I'm like, what does that mean? And he's like, if his feet are pointing a certain way, does his eyes eventually get there, and are they married up before the throw? Because you'll see a lot of guys come late and they're looking at something else and they try to throw somewhere else and they're not on target. He said JJ McCarthy, and not just JJ McCarthy, we were talking about some other quarterbacks too, but they marry their eyes and their feet. Honestly, I was asking about Kirk Cousins too, because I was trying to figure out the whole Kirk Cousins thing. And Kirk marries his eyes with his feet. Like, that's why he's so accurate. But JJ has that. Like, his eyes, his feet, his chest, everything lines up. And again, maybe that's Harbaugh. Maybe that's Harbaugh who like poured into him. And so maybe getting with a guy like Kevin O'Connell will be good for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kirk's big on marriage. I agree.
Well, some of it. Ron, we now know all of the head coaching hires as of this morning. Dan Quinn, Commanders. Give me a favorite and a least favorite.
I don't really like the Dan Quinn pick, to be honest. Like, for Washington, like, I don't know if like, again, I hate the recycle coach thing. Like, you get fired somewhere else, you get to go somewhere else for a little bit, and you get to come back right away versus some of these other younger candidates. The one I like the most, the Ravens defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator.
Mike
coordinator.
McDonald.
Defense, Mike McDonald. Yeah.
And the reason, this one, he's 36, he's young. Like, I like when you get that youthful movement in there. I think the Ravens defense this year was I mean, they and again, Roquan Smith was a big part of it, but they terrorized people. You know what I mean? Like Lamar Jackson down the stretch. We're not going to talk about that, but I do like the McDonald one. Like, his defense is innovative. It has a little bit of Rex Ryan to it, where he's standing guys up, putting guys in the A gap. A little Mike Zimmer to it. So I do like that, but he keeps his safeties deep. Like, it's a lot of Ed Reed birth in that defense, where he always has one or two safeties deep. He's never leaving his DBs out to dry. And I think that's why they had so many, because we can say all we want, like, oh, I wish we would have drafted what's his name from Notre Dame. Look how good he's playing. Yeah, look how good he's playing, because look at the rush. Like, the quarterbacks have no time to throw the ball, so he doesn't have to cover that long.
Yeah.
He's Ron Johnson, and he's everywhere. Tuesdays, the Ron Johnson Show. Wednesdays, Minnesota Basketball Party. He's on with us Thursdays in the Minnesota Football Party, and he will host the Roundtable tomorrow and every Friday with Reggie Wilson and Julia Daniels from Care 11, and he's at 3Ron Johnson on Twitter/X. Ron, awesome stuff once again, man.
Appreciate it.
Great stuff. After this, we've got what do we have? Oh, yeah. Wide receiver targets after this on the Minnesota Football Party. Our show today brought to you by Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. The easiest and most exciting way to play DFS, you against the numbers, more than or less than 2 to 6 stat projections. Watch the winnings roll in, and they have so many stat projections. It would be really fun to do for the Super Bowl, just saying. You can also go cross-sport, so get involved with some football projections, some basketball projections, and have a little fun that way. They've also got a reboot policy. So if you have a player injured in the first half, they don't return, it's rebooted. And Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. It is so exciting when you turn 10 into 250 by hitting like 3, 4, 5 stat projections. That's just a blast. So what you can do, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. One more time, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100.
Start the clock. It's time to execute the 4-minute drill.
Free agency targets. The series continues today with wide receivers. It's the 4-minute drill, so you have a minute each, and you got to be concise. And we start with none other than Luke Braun.
Boy, I don't really see a lot of huge needs, obviously, with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison there. So I don't think you need to like go super crazy here. I'd honestly like a younger body, and that might mean going to the draft instead of free agency. But if we are going to go to free agency, I guess you could go for somebody like DJ Chark or Tyler Boyd if they end up hitting free agency. There are some interesting names that you could maybe try to get at a discount, like if Michael Thomas hits free agency and you want to try the reclamation project or something like that. But honestly, this free agent class doesn't inspire me very much at all. Maybe just bring Brandon Powell back and draft a guy in the middle of the draft.
Arif.
I'm doing what Luke Brown clearly did, and I stalled for time while I looked at who was a wide receiver target. No, I mean, I don't like the top of that market either. I don't like going after like a Mike Evans. I don't like going after an Odell Beckham. I don't like going after some of these guys. And some of the guys that are intriguing from a personnel standpoint or play standpoint, like Curtis Samuel, are a little bit older. Like, I like having that role in this offense. I think that'd be kind of fun. There are some receivers in the draft that kind of fit that role that'd be kind of fun, like Aeneas Smith over here in Mobile. But I think the one guy that I was taking a look at, I actually already forgot his name, but I was looking through it. I think that there are a couple of younger guys like Noah Brown for the Texans that I think have showcased a lot without being that primary receiver. And I don't think they're going to get a primary receiver contract that will allow you to, get deep shots in, get underneath shots in, develop a full field offense that allows you to maximize somebody like Jordan Addison or Justin Jefferson. Noah Brown did really well in the offense with Bobby Sloak at the Houston Texans. He's not Tank Dell, he's not Nico Collins, but he had such a tremendous year. His per route stats are some of the best in the NFL right now, and he's only like 26. So he's somebody that I might take a look at. It took a while for him to catch on. But honestly, I kind of agree is that free agency is kind of a difficult ask for these receivers. This is a pretty old receiver market compared to some of these other positions, and it'd be kind of hard to build around the future with some of these guys.
Inman, go ahead, and then I'll be the anchor leg.
Yeah, like you guys said, one would assume they're probably looking for a bang for the buck guy, or, maybe between Naylor and the draft and bringing back Powell, maybe they don't even sign a wide receiver 3. They go draft a day 3 guy, let those 3 battle it out for 3, 4, and 5. That really wouldn't surprise me either. And let's be real here, Sam. Our guy Malik Knowles, future Hall of Famer, he's going to make this whole thing kind of a moot point anyways. But if I had to pick one guy that checks, most of the boxes, like Luke said, I like Tyler Boyd. Probably going to get pushed out of Cincy when they spend most of their money on T. Higgins, a strong slot guy. He's played for 8 years, and yet he's only going to be 29 next year. So he's played a lot of football, knows what he's doing, good route runner, and knows how to read defense as well. I think he's quarterback friendly, which is great. Good hands, reliable target, all that stuff. If they're ready to win now and compete next year, if that's the mindset, I think he's a guy who could come in and make an impact on day one. If they want to rebuild through the draft, though, and use that money elsewhere, I think especially in this draft class, like Arif already kind of touched on down at the Senior Bowl, it's loaded again. It's stacked with wideouts. You're going to be able to find a lot of nice options on day 3. You can groom and develop with Jalen Naylor the next 2-3 years and give yourself a really nice young core of wideouts for the long haul. That outside of JJ, you wouldn't even have to pay any money to any one of them for at least 2 more years with Jalen Naylor, and even longer with Addison and whatever potential rookie they draft. So I like Boyd if they end up running it back with Kirk Cousins.
I like Boyd a lot. I think Darnell Mooney would be a Kwesi-like reclamation.
See that?
Former 1,000-yard receiver back in 2021. Just didn't have great quarterback play the last couple of years. I could see...
Man, the Bears Twitter tweets would be good.
That'd be funny.
That would be good.
Yeah, I could also see Josh Reynolds, even though he's right now being pilloried.
Yeah.
No, I get it. It was his fault. The reason that 4th down didn't work. That's not your whole career. He could be helpful.
Fresh start.
Clean slate.
Get your mind off it. You go a couple of states over.
And I'm going to be honest too. I am no longer convinced KJ Osborne is necessarily gone. I was before the year. I don't know if he priced himself out of Minnesota's budget. So I think that's on the table as well. But there's plenty of time to get into that as free agency approaches. Follow Arif Hasan at Arif Hasan NFL for Mobile updates. And we'll check back in with him on Monday, get the full report from what he observed down in Alabama. Minnesota Football Party. Please subscribe. Watch us on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Listen to us on Locked On Vikings. We're here every Monday and every Thursday talking Vikings. See you next time.